Every trader dreams of catching the breakout the moment the market finally moves in their direction, but few are prepared for what comes after: the silence, the tension, the quiet fear of giving it back. You were right. The setup worked. But now every tick against you feels like betrayal. This isn't about the chart anymore. It's about control and the illusion of safety we chase when we try to keep what was never ours to hold. In this story, we explore the psychology behind scaling out not as a strategy, but as a practice of awareness. Because the hardest part of trading isn't losing, it's staying conscious while you're winning. This is Case 15 Breakout Retest, Scale Out Logic. Welcome to Mind Over Markets. Every trader dreams of moments like this: a perfect setup, clean levels, momentum in their favor, that rare alignment when logic, structure, and instinct all point the same way. For Jason, this was that moment. He had been watching the pair for days, the quiet buildup, the tightening range, the coiled tension just waiting to release. And then it happened. A clean breakout, volume expanding, confirmation candle strong. He entered the trade without hesitation, methodical, precise, everything by plan. His stop was tight, his target clear, and almost immediately the market rewarded him. Green, profit, validation. For a few seconds he felt that intoxicating rush, the confirmation that he was right. But within minutes something else began to surface, a whisper in the background of his mind. What if it pulls back? What if this is the top before it collapses? He adjusted his chair, staring at the screen, watching every flicker of the candle as if it could betray him. The breakout continued higher, but his heart didn't relax. It tightened. This was the paradox of success. He was winning, yet already afraid to lose. He looked at his floating profit and imagined it vanishing. He visualized the pullback, the retest, the false return to entry. And before he realized it, the excitement of winning had turned into the tension of keeping. Jason leaned forward, eyes fixed, trapped between trust and control. He wasn't fighting the market anymore. He was fighting the part of himself that couldn't let go. He thought about taking partial profits just to feel safe. That word echoed safe, as if safety existed in markets built on uncertainty. He whispered under his breath, "If I take some off, I'll feel better." But would he, or would he just be feeding the same fear in disguise? He remembered something he'd written in his trading journal weeks earlier. Sometimes I exit, not because the setup is over, but because I can't hold my emotions any longer. The realization stung. Was he about to repeat the same pattern again? The next candle pulled back slightly, small, ordinary, healthy. Yet to Jason it felt like betrayal. His pulse quickened. He could feel his finger hovering near the close button. His rational mind whispered, "This is just a retest, let it breathe." But emotion has a voice that logic can't silence. It doesn't reason, it reacts. He zoomed in. He zoomed out. He changed time frames as if one of them might offer emotional comfort. Each chart told him the same thing: hold. But holding wasn't the problem. Trust was. Jason exhaled sharply and leaned back. He opened his notebook, something he hadn't done mid-trade in months. He wrote quickly, almost as if his hand was trying to catch up to his racing mind. "I'm not afraid of losing this trade. I'm afraid of losing this feeling. The feeling of being right." He stared at those words. They hit like truth always does: simple, painful, undeniable. He realized the real attachment wasn't to profit. It was to identity, to the ego that whispered, "Don't let this one slip." You finally got it right. The chart continued to move, pulling back deeper, now testing the breakout level. Jason's jaw tightened. He felt the old fear rising again, the fear of being wrong after being right. That silent storm traders know too well the anxiety of watching unrealized gains shrink the urge to do something, the illusion that action equals control. He caught himself thinking, If I close here at least, I'll still win. But another thought followed immediately after. If I close here, I'll also stop learning. He let that second thought sink in. He realized that in trading, the chart isn't the teacher, the emotion is. And the only way to learn from emotion is to feel it without obeying it. So he stayed. Not because he was confident in the setup, but because he wanted to understand the part of himself that wasn't. The retest continued tagging his entry zone almost perfectly. Price paused, balanced, uncertain, like a mirror reflecting his own state. Then slowly, gradually, the candles began to rise again. Green returned. Profit reappeared. The same number on the screen that had once created panic now evoked calm. Jason watched motionless. He didn't celebrate. He didn't tighten stops. He simply observed. He wrote another line in his journal: patience is not waiting. It's staying awake while you wait. The market continued higher. His plan was unfolding exactly as designed. But this time, he didn't feel the rush of victory. He felt something different, a quiet understanding that he was no longer the same. Because real growth doesn't come from winning. It comes from holding. And in that stillness, Jason realized the breakout was never in the market. It was in him. The next day, Jason reviewed his trade. He looked at the screenshots, the notes, the emotional footprints left behind on the page. Everything about the setup was perfect, clean structure, confirmed breakout, measured retest. But the real lesson wasn't in the chart, it was in the pause. He read his own words again. Patience is not waiting. It's staying awake while you wait. He smiled softly. He realized that he hadn't learned how to trade better. He'd learned how to see better. Still, there was a question left unresolved. What comes after awareness? He could feel that old instinct rising again. The need to act, to adjust, to secure. It was subtle, but it was there, that voice that always says, "You've come this far. Don't lose what you've earned." He knew that voice. It wasn't logic. It was attachment wearing the mask of prudence. He turned back to his journal and wrote, "Scale out. Do I do it to manage risk or to manage fear?" He sat with that question for a while because scaling out, taking partial profits, sounds rational. It feels disciplined. But sometimes it's just emotion disguised as process. He remembered all those times he had cut positions, not because the setup had changed, but because he couldn't hold his own uncertainty any longer. He'd called it strategy, but deep down it was surrender. He decided that this time he would learn to scale out differently, not to escape the discomfort, but to observe it. He wanted to turn the act of exiting into an act of awareness. That week, another setup appeared, same structure, same clarity. A breakout, a retest, clean energy in the move. He entered without hesitation, but this time he knew what was coming. The pullback, the emotions, the noise within. As the position moved into profit, his heart began its usual rhythm, the quiet excitement, the anticipation of control. He smiled at it like an old friend. He didn't fight it. He simply noticed. Then at the first sign of hesitation in price, he opened his journal again. He wrote, "The market is slowing. My breath is too. Am I reacting to price or to my own tension?" The question itself dissolved half the fear. He waited. Price began to consolidate near his first target. The old Jason would have hit the close button, immediately lock in. Feel safe, breathe again. But this time, he chose something different. He scaled out not to escape, but to observe what remained. He took partial profits 30% off, then sat quietly watching how his body reacted. It was strange. He expected relief. Instead, he felt curiosity. What is this feeling, he thought? Why does comfort feel so empty? He realized that most of his trading life he had been using profit as pain relief. Every early exit, every premature close was just a way of saying, "I can't handle uncertainty." But now something shifted. He saw scale out as something entirely new, not a shield, but a mirror. The smaller position left behind was like a teacher whispering, "Can you still be calm when less feels at risk, but more is unknown?" That question stayed with him. The market began to drift again. He watched the candles breathe, expansion, contraction, pause. He noticed how his thoughts followed the same rhythm. Every green candle brought confidence. Every red candle invited doubt. But the pattern wasn't on the chart. It was in him. He wrote the market retest levels. I retest patience. The trade continued. The retest held. Price climbed. He scaled another portion off at the next level, not out of fear, but out of rhythm. The act itself felt clean, deliberate. No hesitation, no self-talk, just awareness in motion. He wrote again, scale out is not about control. It's about creating space to think, to breathe, to stay. He looked at the remaining position and smiled. It was small now, insignificant to the account, but deeply significant to the mind. It was a physical reminder that he could stay connected to the process, even when comfort invited disconnection. For hours, he let the trade run. He didn't need to watch every tick. He'd already found what he came for, not profit, but presence. When the trade finally reversed and stopped out the final piece, he didn't flinch. He simply nodded as if watching the tide return to shore. He closed his notebook and whispered the scale out was never about saving profit. It was about saving awareness. That night he reflected on the entire experience. He saw clearly how his relationship with markets had evolved. At first he traded to win. Then he traded to not lose. Now he traded to understand. He began to see that every decision in trading entry, exit, hold scale is a reflection of one question. Am I acting from fear or from awareness? And awareness, he realized, doesn't eliminate fear. It simply makes space for it to exist without command. He turned off his screens, leaving the room dimly lit by the warm glow of his desk lamp. He ran his hand over the cover of his notebook, worn soft, full of fingerprints and truths. Then he wrote one final line for the day: you don't scale out of trades. You scale out of attachment. He sat back and let the words settle, because he knew they were more than reflection, they were revelation. And for the first time, Jason understood what mastery really meant. Not the absence of fear, but the awareness of it. Not control over the market, but control over himself. He smiled quietly. He wasn't just a trader anymore. He was a student of stillness. Days passed, and Jason began to notice something different in himself. He no longer opened charts with urgency. He opened them with curiosity. The market no longer looked like a battlefield, it looked like a conversation. He had stopped asking, "What will it do?" Now he asked, "What is it showing me?" The shift was subtle but powerful. When he used to trade, every tick felt personal. Now each candle felt like weather something. To witness, not manipulate. One morning the setup appeared again. Another breakout, another retest, familiar structure. But inside, there was no rush, only rhythm. He waited, watching volume rise, watching price compress and breathe. He felt the same quiet awareness he had discovered weeks before, an inner stillness that whispered, "You already know what to do." He entered the trade, calm, deliberate. No excitement, no tension, just precision. This was no longer reaction, this was response. As the trade moved in his favor, he watched not to confirm profit, but to confirm presence. Every small pullback tested not his plan, but his patience. Every pause in momentum reminded him of the same truth. The chart retests structure. The trader retests awareness. He scaled partials again, same as before, but the energy was different now. There was no relief, no fear, only flow. He could feel awareness moving through each decision like breath, moving through silence. He wrote quietly in his notebook, scaling his breathing. In, hold, out, release. It wasn't metaphor. It was mastery. The act of managing size had become the rhythm of managing self. He realized how often traders confuse control with care. They hold on too tightly, thinking protection equals discipline. But discipline, he now knew, was softness, the ability to let go without panic. He remembered the first time he had ever taken profit too soon, the anxiety, the justification, the endless replay of what if. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the awareness that fear had won. And now, sitting in front of the same kind of move, he saw how different it felt when fear was seen, not followed. The market pulled back hard. Most would have closed the rest instantly. He didn't. He watched. He wasn't careless. He was conscious. His hand rested lightly on the mouse, his breathing steady. He whispered, "Stay with the process, not the profit." Price held the level, bounced, then expanded higher. He smiled not because he was right, but because he had remained awake. That was the difference. He wasn't trading to win anymore. He was trading to stay aware. Every trade was just another opportunity to practice presence. The final scale out came naturally, no decision, no debate. He took it not from fear, but from flow. The screen showed green numbers, but his focus was elsewhere. He was watching his mind, how quiet it had become. He wrote one last note for the session: "I didn't manage a trade today. I managed myself." The words carried weight. They felt like the summary of years condensed into one sentence. That night, Jason sat on his balcony, city lights flickering like distant charts. He thought about how long it had taken to understand something so simple. The market is not chaos, it is reflection. It doesn't reward control, it rewards awareness. He thought about all the traders still chasing certainty, still mistaking control for comfort. He wanted to tell them that control is the heaviest burden you can carry in a world built on uncertainty. Awareness, on the other hand, weighs nothing. He smiled and closed his eyes. For the first time in his career, he wasn't waiting for the next setup. He was living it. Because the real breakout, he realized, isn't in price. It's in perception. It's the moment you stop trading to prove something and start trading to see something. He whispered into the night, "The market moves. I move with it. No fear, no force, just flow." And that was it. No grand ending, no celebration, just silence, awareness, and the slow rhythm of breathing, the same rhythm that had carried him from control to trust. In that stillness, Jason finally understood scaling out wasn't about taking pieces of profit. It was about taking pieces of ego away. And as those pieces fell, what remained was something far greater than any gain clarity. He opened his journal one last time before bed and wrote, "Control fades. Awareness remains." Then he closed it, turned off the lights, and let the market fade into darkness. Inside him, there was only stillness, the stillness that every trader searches for and only a few ever find. The next morning was quiet. No charts, no notifications, no urgency, just the soft rhythm of rain against the window. Jason sat with his notebook again. He flipped through the pages, the history of his mind written in ink and hesitation. Some pages felt heavy, like memories of who he used to be. Others were light, like spaces where awareness had finally settled. He stopped at one of the first entries, written months ago in hurried handwriting, "Don't lose what you've earned." He smiled. Back then, he believed trading was about protection, guarding profits, defending ego, maintaining control. Now he saw the illusion, because the moment you try to protect something fragile inside yourself, it starts to rule you. He wrote a single line beneath it: "There is nothing to protect when you trade from awareness." He let the pen rest on the paper. That sentence wasn't strategy, it was surrender. He realized the greatest paradox in trading was this: when you stop trying to win, you finally start trading well. When you stop grasping for certainty, clarity arrives. When you stop fearing loss, you begin to understand value. Jason leaned back in his chair and looked around the room. The same screens, the same desk, the same charts, but everything felt different because he was different. The market hadn't changed. Only his relationship with it had. He thought about scale-outs again, how they had once felt like compromise, but now felt like balance. How partial exits had become a language of presence, a way to stay connected to the process without being consumed by it. He wrote again slowly this time. Scaling out isn't about taking less. It's about feeling fully. The letters flowed easily. He didn't need to analyze them. They already made sense. He had learned that every candle tests your faith, every pullback tests your patience, and every profit tests your humility. But underneath all of it, trading is never about money. It's about awareness moving through uncertainty. It's about watching yourself respond to change and learning from that reflection. Jason stood and looked at the gray sky outside. For years, he had seen the market as a storm he needed to survive. Now he saw it as weather always shifting, never personal. He whispered, "You can't control the weather. You can only learn how to stand in the rain." He smiled, peaceful, grounded, because he finally understood every trade is just another chance to practice letting go. Every exit, a reminder that awareness is the real position you're holding. He placed his pen on the desk and closed the notebook. It wasn't an ending. It was an alignment. As he walked away from the screens, he felt something rare in a trader's world: silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of integration. The kind that tells you the lesson has landed and the mind no longer needs to chase. Because in the end, the goal of trading is not to escape fear. It's to recognize that fear is part of the pattern, and awareness is what makes the pattern clear. He whispered one last time before leaving the room. The market retests its levels. Awareness retests its truth. Then he turned off the lights. And in that darkness, the lesson remained etched, not on charts, but in consciousness. The best exits are not measured in pips or points. They're measured in peace. The market retests its levels. The mind retests its lessons. Every exit is a mirror. It shows not what you gained, but what you were willing to release. Jason learned that scaling out isn't about taking less, it's about feeling more. It's about finding balance between trust and control, between presence and profit. Because awareness is the real edge, the only tool that doesn't expire when the trend ends. You can't control the market. You can only observe yourself with it in it. And that observation, quiet, patient, precise, is the beginning of mastery. So before your next trade, before your next exit, ask yourself one question. Am I acting from fear or from awareness? This is Mind Over Markets. If this story brought you stillness or clarity, share it with another trader who's learning to let go, because in trading, consciousness spreads one reflection at a time.